And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DeRIenzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Marie Moossy.
And our guest for the first time, Ralph Poynter. Welcome to Let Them Talk, Ralph.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks
thank
for
you.
coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I spread the word.
Right.
All
Well,
right.
Ralph's been here before, but he hasn't been on camera in the past. This is his first time on camera. He was here on the other side of the camera when we
Sitting in the
had
studio.
his significant other, his wife and beloved,
Yes.
Lynne Stewart, who some of you might have heard of. We talked a little bit about on our last show last week. And Ralph is you know, I'm sure tense about what's going to be happening the day after tomorrow on the 15th when you're going to tell us more about what to expect from the
resentencing
trial.
coming up.
Yeah, we're all tense about it.
Because Lynne Stewart is currently incarcerated. So
Yes, and I never dreamt from the beginning that I would ever be in this position, feeling that the government could get over on the people to the extent that they did with this bogus idea of terrorism. But here we are, and
That's
here
right.
we are waiting for the resentencing and hoping that the judge will resentence her to 28 months and she should never have been there in the first place. And it's a lesson. One of the things I always said in the early years when I looked at the movies about the way things happened in Germany, and I says, I don't believe this. You know, like when you see all of the Nazi flags, I says, they could never make people buy that many flags. But then we had 9/11. I looked up in Broadway. There were flags everywhere, and people bought the flags. And I says, they can make people spend their good money on nonsense. So it's an education for me, and now we have to educate everybody out there. I says, they told you to lie and picked your pocket. And if you don't believe it, count and see what your dollar was worth this year as opposed to last year, as opposed to 10 years, as opposed to 20 years ago. They picked your pocket and gave you terrorism. And I always felt bad. I says, you know, they took the land, they took Africa and gave us the Bible. And I'm saying, you know, people are not going to go for that. Not again, but they did it again. And I'm wondering, when are we going to wake up? I got hit over the head personally, up close and personal. I'm upset about what was done to Lynne Stewart. I hope the people out there are getting upset about what this lying government is doing to them.
By the way, Lynn's picture is behind us on the screen. And maybe, Ralph, you could explain where things are at with, for folks who might have been on Mars for the last 5 years.
Yes.
Who is Lynne Stewart? Why should people be interested in this case, this legal case?
I like the question. Lynne Stewart is and has been the lawyer for the people for the last 30 years. She was first an activist coming out of an experience in Harlem as a librarian and a teacher. She didn't understand why the attitude towards black children was what it was. And I'll go further. She was born not 5 miles from Harlem, valedictorian of every class she was ever in, and she didn't know Harlem existed. Well, when she walked in Harlem and says, whoa, what is this? She asked questions, and she was unhappy with the answers she got. And then there was a fellow who was teaching across the hall who was quite willing to tell her what the problem was. Racism, big time, front and center. And she started fighting that. And in fighting racism, in fighting miseducation, she became educated as to what America was. And her education continued. And when we lost the struggle for community control in 1969, 1970, when I got out of jail as a result of this struggle, she came to me one day and said, you know, I can't do this anymore. And I asked her, I says, well, what would you want to do? And she says, I'd like to become a lawyer. Well, we had 6 children between us. No, we had 5 children. I had 3 before I met her. She had 2, and then 1, which we didn't know about at the time, was on the way. But we had made an agreement that if we got together, we were going to take care of all of our children. I had my motorcycle shop. She was a teacher. And she says, how can I do this going to law school? And I thought about it, and I says, well, you have brains, you have tenacity, you have empathy, and you have courage. This is the perfect thing for you.
Where was that motorcycle shop?
That motorcycle shop was on Avenue B between 10th and 11th. It was called Far East Cycle. And we started out, Road Racer was the first of the road racers, and each shop built them independently. Now you buy them right from Honda, Kawasaki, right out of Japan. But we had the Street Racer, and this is where we made a living. 1970 to 1975 in Avenue B between 10th and 11th. In 1975, I moved to Greenwich Village and changed the name to Ralph Cycle. And on the corner of Charles and West, and we continued. The rest is history. And Lynne continued in the law business the same way she handled herself as a teacher. Everyone came in with a instant respect, and she found out about people from their cases, and she did the cases in a manner that when she was asked many years later how she got herself up to deal with these cases, her answer was, well, when someone comes into my office, I make pretend my mother is in the hospital and she needs an operation, and this person across from me is the only person with the money for that, so I start working on the case in that manner, whether they have money or not. And I says, well, that's a good way to put it. And this is the way Lynne has conducted her law business. This is her personal life.
Mention some of the cases, just to do some background. What are some of the cases that Lynne has worked on, some of the more famous cases she's worked on?
Yes, I was just saying the other day, I believe her most famous case in this city was the case of Larry Davis, the so-called dude that elude. And when he shot 6 police in self-defense. And Larry...
And he was acquitted.
And he was acquitted, and I say this was the greatest case. Lynne did that. She did the summations. She was on top of that case. She was on top of the police. I had gone to do the ballistics on this case, and it was so overwhelming as to what happened. He was fighting in self-defense, but as former Mayor Koch said, you have no right of self-defense against police. And Lynne says, I differ with you. We have more right of self-defense against the police because they are, in reality, an army of occupation within the black community. Needless to argue this point, just look at the number of young black kids killed in the most recent Oscar Grant, handcuffed, laying on the ground, face down, killed by police.
That was in Oakland, California.
Oakland, California. And we need not. The book on stolen lives started out as a small book. Now it's a New York telephone book, and it's increasing. The number of black kids shot since 9/11, this fantasy brought up by the American government about we are under attack has been used by this army of occupation to kill not Muslims, not Mexicans, but black kids. And if just those numbers explain it. And
so now we're getting a good idea of where Lynne was coming from politically, why she did these cases, and her motivations. Let's take it to this case, the case where she defended Sheikh Omar Abdurrahman, who was convicted of conspiracy for involvement in a bombing plot that really never, it was one of these plots that really, it was vague. There was never any real plot that anybody put their hands on, but he was definitely prosecuted and convicted of a conspiracy. And I believe, what was the charge?
Sentenced to life plus 65
life plus
years.
65 years for conspiracy.
So,
and what's the other law that is very
Sedition.
rarely, sedition? What is sedition?
well, what you're getting here, let me correct that. What you're
Okay.
getting is Ralph's view of the world, and I challenge anyone who would challenge me about my view of what America is. Lynne's view, Lynne has empathy, much more empathy than I could ever have coming from where I come from. But one of the things we discuss is where she came from. She came from a middle-class family in Belrose. I came from a middle-class family in Western Pennsylvania. I lived in the same house I was born in with my mother and father there for the first 18 years of my life until I went on to college. She lived in her family for her first 18 years till she went on to college. But then when you say she is white and I am black, then the worlds separate. Then the similarities go apart. But I know that my reality is more real America than her reality. And the thing that made Lynne great, that makes her great, is she is an eclectic. She learns. Each case she took on, she not only learned about economic position, she not only learned about social condition, she learned about social implications, and she's just this magnificent person that grew and grew and grew.
How did she learn? What did she learn in the Rahman case?
What she learned, and it's very interesting, and sitting when we went to Ramsey Clark's office, when he wanted a lawyer for Abdul Rahman, they wanted somebody with reputation. And when we went to the office, Lynne's words came out, and she says, you know, I know very little about the Middle East. I don't think I'm the person you want. And as Ramsey Clark importuned her to take the case, she's the type of person who learned and learned and learned. She started a year behind, and in 2 months caught up to the other attorneys. And I'm saying, this is typical Lynne Stewart. Then it became a challenge to her, finding out about, you know, what is the problem in the Middle East. You know, as she went to school, and as we all learned, when Nasser took over, you know, took back the Suez Canal and the problem with England and Eisenhower and the whole disintegration of Europe, we all knew that. But we didn't know anything about, you know, the internal workings of Egypt. And Lynne Stewart learned about that. And Hosni Mubarak. And all of these names became big in her mind about
The president of Egypt.
the president of Egypt who runs against himself every year. And it's been wrapped around every American president for the last 20 years.
He's been a president since like 1982 or something.
And he's gets American funds second only to Israel. So it's really a government of America in the Middle East. But the interesting thing, the American CIA has stated in their written record that there is no way this despotic government is going to be overthrown without violence. This is what the Americans say. Because he runs against himself. If you would elect to run against him, I think the last person who wanted to run against him is in jail. And killing his students on the street, go to jail without trial.
Right.
He disappears you in jail.
This is Egypt we're talking about.
This is Egypt, the government of Hosni Mubarak. And this is where the blind sheikh came from.
Right.
Now, America got involved with the blind sheikh when he was working for the American government in Afghanistan to fight the Russians. So they wanted religious fervor, you know, for the Afghan struggle against the Russians. And then when the Russians were removed from Afghanistan, the Americans applauded Sheikh Omar and Abdel Rahman. And Lynne never could get to how the sheikh exactly got from Afghanistan to the United States. And when she would ask the sheikh and say, well, you know, then what happened? Where did you? And it would always get vague. And then she says, well, I said, that's not your business, what he's doing.
I interviewed the sheikh in jail when he was MCC before he was convicted, and I asked him that question, and I couldn't get an answer.
It's very vague. So I says, that's not your problem. Your problem is, what is the sheikh doing here? And is he guilty of this crime that he's charged with? And it becomes clearer every day that he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, talking about the wrong people. And Lynne is in the wrong place at the wrong time, because in defending the sheikh, in defending his innocence, she points out the criminality of the government that we all call our government. They know the sheikh is innocent, but they have done it over and over and over again. The same MO of having a terrorist plot. Send somebody in a neighborhood with a lot of money, talking big about helping your country, your oppressed country, throwing money around, taking film, having cameras, and all a person has to do is say, yeah. And as the government said about the blind sheikh, his only mistake was when Imad Salem, this was the operative from Egypt, being paid by the FBI, when he was going to the sheikh with all of these plots, and the sheikh would say, no, I don't think this is good for Islam. No, find a military target. No, but he never reported Emad Salem to the FBI that he was working for. So this is the only charge. Somebody came to him with a plot, and he didn't go to the FBI. But I say, and as Lynne said very well, when somebody goes to the Pope or a bishop and says, I'm going to deal with those people who have abortion clinics, and they kill them, they never arrested a Pope yet. But they arrested Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman for not going to the FBI to report Emad Salem. And I wonder what would have happened if he went to the FBI and said, there's this guy out here with plots. They would have probably killed him or arrested him on the spot.
No,
and you can listen to Emad Salem's tapes and see for yourself. If you just type in "Let Them Talk Emad Salem" and you can listen. We have it. I got copies of those tapes and we have it on our website, so you can hear. And we've played it on our show before. But Joni, can I just reintroduce? We have Ralph Poynter here, who is the closest associate to Lynne Stewart and her husband and life partner. And we're talking about Lynne's case, which is coming up. And we're live right now. And you can call us. The number's up on the screen, 212-757-1538. We'll take your calls. Remember, there's an 8-second delay, and turn your television down when you call, if you do. And Joni, Moossy.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, and then despite Lynne's best efforts, the Sheikh was convicted, but she continued to represent him post-conviction, even post-appeals. She visited him in jail, and this is where the problems with her began, and the government was taping her interactions in jail with the Sheikh. They were taping her phone calls with him. It was one of the most incredible things about the trial was to hear these tapes. It was something you almost never hear because there's such a strong confidentiality between a lawyer and their client.
But I would like to point out the most significant thing about the tapes, audio and video, was they never got anything. And the only criticism the government made of her was she was trying to stop the guards from listening to their conversations. Excuse me. And if she wasn't stopping the guards from listening to her conversation, she would not have been doing her job. So now, since when does stopping the guards listening to your conversation become criminal? Well, Lynne Stewart is in jail for that. And they kept saying it over and over and over again. Well, she stopped the guards from listening to the conversation. It tells me two things. First of all, Americans don't know what a good attorney is. And if you don't understand that your attorney is supposed to protect you from the guards, who are the guards? Protect you from your prison lockup, to protect you from the government that is arresting you, that is holding you in prison. And they say it over and over again, so much so that people say, well, she was stopping the guards from listening to their conversation. Well, what about that? So here we have Lynne Stewart in jail for doing her job because the government made that seem like a criminal activity. Can you imagine listening in on conversations between a lawyer and a client and you can't find anything wrong? So you have to say, gee, she was stopping us from listening to them. Yes, that's what she was doing. She knew her job. And here she sits in jail based on that. Now, let's get very clear about that. She violated a prison regulation that said you cannot take any words out of the Sheikh. Well, I'm not going to go into the SAMs. It would take an hour. But the SAMs specifically stated in black and white, if you violate these SAMs, you may be removed from seeing your client. She violated the SAMs. They said, gee, you made a press release. Renegotiate so you can go back in. And when she went back in, they were taping her. Well, it didn't make any difference. She wasn't doing anything but representing the blind Sheikh.
It seems like they were saying that the crime of conspiring to break a rule is a felony.
She didn't conspire to break a rule. She broke a rule. She broke a federal special administration prison regulation. But you say, how little is that? You break a prison regulation when you go in with chewing gum. Because possibly if you have chewing gum in your mouth, there could be drugs in there. That's a federal prison regulation. That is not a law like the recent Guantanamo lawyers broke court orders. And they did it 20 times, 100 times beyond what Lynne Stewart did. And Lynne said they did great lawyering. This is what lawyers are supposed to do. Well, they never spent the day in jail. And Lynne is looking at life. And as Lynne says, The difference is Lynne represents you and I, the people. They represent Enron, Standard Oil, British Petroleum, all of these large companies. So therefore, they can they can disobey court orders dealing with the same accused people, accused terrorists. Lynne defends a man who is obviously not guilty, who's been demonized by the press, and she's looking at resentencing. So here we are in the position of Thursday, hoping that Lynne Stewart gets 28 months as opposed to the 15 to 30 years that the government has asked for.
Very unusual, the whole idea of appealing the sentence, because she was sentenced to 28 months. It was...
Well, it's not unusual to appeal a sentence, but it's unusual for the prosecutor to appeal a sentence. It's very common for the defendant to appeal all sorts of things.
I didn't even know that the prosecutor could appeal.
Exactly. So
well, it's unusual.
I've never seen it before.
Here they are going after Lynne Stewart, and you say, well, why are they doing this? They're doing it because if Lynne Stewart is not guilty, someone is. And who is guilty? It's not Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman. It's the federal government, because they set this up. This was the prototype case of give them terror. And they did it over and over again. And I think right up the road, Newburgh, in this poor community, 55% unemployment. They send a operative in who has money and promises money, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then these young men are in jail. Liberty City, they send somebody in with money and gathers people around them. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. They promise them shoes and a Hummer. Give me a break. This is a terror case. And these young men go to jail. All over the country, they've been getting away with this. And the first one was Lynne Stewart. So when people begin to say, well, if Lynne Stewart didn't do anything, what is this terror all about? And when they look and see what terror is all about, they'll find out that they gave them terror and picked the pockets, just like they gave black people the Bible and took the land. And so it is a story over and over and over again. And I say, when do people wake up? And the sad thing is, as Lynne Stewart said, well, people are oppressed. We fight oppression. But if people were not oppressed, we wouldn't have to be here. We don't need this, if everyone understood.
You're listening to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DeRIenzo, Miss Joan Moossy, our guest Ralph Poynter, talking about Lynne Stewart, whose resentencing or appeal of her resentencing is this Thursday. And I want to ask about what activities are going on in the next couple of days to support Lynne. But one last question I have is this whole idea, again, of resentencing. What are they talking about there?
Well, the judge sentenced Lynne to 28 months because the judge recognized, and I won't say the ridiculousness, but the injustice of this whole case. Because when they first brought the case against Lynne Stewart, this judge, John Codall, threw it out. And he says, this is no case. And then we also have to understand that under the Clinton Justice Department, they looked at the case and said, well, this is not really a case. Wow. But only after 9/11 with John Ashcroft and Bush did they say, this is a case. And then they went after Lynne. And now here we are with Mr. Obama and his Justice Department. Mr. Obama, who says, we're not going to look back at Bush or the injustices or Hugh and all of these people who talked about terror and supported the institution of terror into the American way of life. We are torturers in America. Those who introduced that, Obama says, we're not going to look back. But for Lynne Stewart, he's looking back. He's trying to continue, he is continuing the Bush agenda. Let us not have justice. Let us not deal with this in this manner. So now, Lynne Stewart is going before resentencing before the judge who threw the case out. And then when Lynne was convicted, surprised me too. I certainly believe it must have surprised everyone, including the judge, that the people were so intimidated by the media that they found her guilty of all kind of nonsense. I don't even remember all of the charges. But I know she was facing terrorist time. The judge gave her 28 months. And she says, a courageous judge gave me 28 months after I was found guilty. And
how long has she been in now?
She's been in 7 months, going on 8 months. And we're counting. When somebody's in jail, you're counting. We figure 28 months federal sentence. It comes to about 24 months, and then we take away 7. And I'm thinking, well, 17, and of course could be 8. You're always stretching it.
Sure,
16 months, and you're pushing for the date for her to get out. And then we get this: put her in jail instantly, resentence her, and if you don't resentence her to more time, we're going to take the case and send it to a judge who will give her more time. So here we are, hoping that the judge doesn't give her more than 28 months, under the threat of the Second Circuit, who says if you don't do it, we're going to take the case away and give her more time. This is where we are. Well, I'm hoping that the judge sentences her to time served so she can go home, because she's 70 years old. She was sick when she went in. She was 2 days away from surgery. They said, forget the surgery, put her in jail, and I'm not going to take the time to go in to the problem with medicine in the Bureau of Prisons, because we all know what the problem with health care is out here in the street. Now, add that to a jail situation, handcuffed, shackled in the prison. Mm-hmm. And they took the handcuffs off when the doctor walked in one day and said, what is this? And as soon as the doctor walked out, the prison guard says, hey, this is my job. We're on camera. You must be handcuffed again and shackled. Cannot sleep.
Ralph Poynter, we have about a minute and a half. What's going on? What can people do who want to support Lynne?
Please come out Wednesday at 5:30 at Tom Paine Park. That is at Worth Street and Center. You will see people. You will see the loudspeakers. We're having an event for Lynne. And after, from 5:30 to 7 at Tom Paine Park at Worth and Center, we're going to march 3 blocks to the prison. And we're going to have drums and sound makers, every sound maker you can have, so that when we walk by that prison, everybody in the prison will know we're there.
That's tomorrow.
That is tomorrow, Wednesday, 5:30 to 9:30 for the whole event. Come whenever you can. And sentencing is Thursday at 2 p.m. But come early. We want to make that Tom Paine Park around that courthouse look like Times Square at New Year's Eve. And if you pack it, the government will know that they can't do anything without the public watching.
Is there a website that people can
There
go to?
is a website, lynnestewart.org, L-Y-N-N-E, Stewart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T.org, or call me, 917-853-9759. I answer all hours of the night. I wish we had hours here, because it would take hours to explain this case.
Thank you very much, Ralph Poynter, for joining us on Let 'Em Talk.
All right. Thanks for coming.